So I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to be here this summer. It's been so fun getting to know a lot of you. And I know maybe that's not the same for you. It's not been as fun to get to know me. But for you guys, I really do appreciate that. I appreciate Pastor Dan allowing me to come. It's been great. The big question I've been getting about preaching this time is when I say, oh, yeah, I'm preaching, the big question I get is, cool, when's Joey preaching? So I get that a lot. They're really excited to see Joey preach next week, guys. Sorry, you can all leave now and then just come back next week, and it'll be the good preaching. So aren't you guys excited to have somebody in your own, like that grew up here, that knows everyone, be on part of staff, and get to preach? Yes, let's give him a hand. And Brian as well, leading worship, being a part of the team. Guys, it's going to be so excited. I'm going to be so excited to see the changes that happen in the church. One thing, though, is Joey's a little scary. I don't know if you guys heard, but he tried to kill me the other day when we went to lunch. He took me in his new V8 Toyota something, and it's a frightening car. So just if he asks you to do that, make sure your will is made out and your insurance is fully paid. It's a frightening experience. All right, so today we're going to be talking about investing for dummies. So we're going to be talking about me again, right? I'm the dummy in this case. I'm going to tell you my investing story and how I figured out how to invest. So a few years ago, I owned a bunch of short-term rental properties. So short-term rental properties are essentially Airbnbs, VRBOs, that sort of thing. So people would come and they'd stay for a few days, a vacation spot, and I had them in a few different states in the country of the U.S., and they would stay there for a few days and they'd leave, and it was making me good money. I was making a living off of it. I loved having those properties. When I wasn't staying there, then or when other people weren't staying there, then I could go stay there. It was a great time, right? But it got really annoying, got really stressful, because people are people. A lot of them were really great, but some of them would lie, they'd cheat, they'd steal my stuff, and I'd show up and I'd be like, well, where did that thing go, or what happened there? And you ended up spending a bunch of money fixing stuff. So it came to the point where I needed to sell these properties. So I sold all the properties, sold the last one in 2022, and then I had some money. And because I had been making a living off of the income of renting out these properties, I needed to replace that income or go and start working somewhere that probably wouldn't pay me enough to live, right? So I sold all the properties, and then I started thinking about investing. I had never invested before. I didn't know anything about investing. I didn't know much about stocks, about bonds, about markets. I didn't know anything. So I needed to figure out how to invest. I found 3 simple things everyone who wants to invest needs to do. The first one is they need to receive, right? You need to get something to invest. You need to make money in some way. You need to sell something. You need to work for a long time. You need to get an inheritance. You need something to invest. Do you guys know that Jesus speaks about investing? In Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, there's this parable he tells called the parable of the talents. And now, Jesus speaks to different groups of people throughout his ministry. Sometimes he's speaking to the crowds, right? Like he'd be speaking to a crowd like this. And then other times he goes and he's just with his disciples. He takes them aside and starts speaking just to his disciples. So at this point, when he's about to tell the parable of the talents, he's speaking just to his disciples. Let's keep that in mind. Also, this is one of the very last things that he says before he gets arrested and crucified. It's the second to the last parable he tells in Matthew. It's near the end of his ministry in Luke. And I know that whenever somebody is saying their last words, we want to pay attention, right? If we've ever had anyone that we've loved that is on their deathbed and they're saying their last words, we want to hear exactly what they have to say. What are they going to say to me? Because I will remember those words for a long time. I remember the last conversations I had with my mom before she passed away. I remember the last conversation I had with my grandpa before he passed away. I remember those things for the rest of his life, for the rest of my life. And so I know in this moment, we want to pay careful attention to what Jesus is saying. And so let's just read the first couple of verses here, verses 14 and 15. It says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who has called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, and each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey." So in 2022, when I sold all my property, I was given something to invest. These servants were given a chance to please their master. So as we begin to look at this parable, I think there's 3 things we need to think about first. 3 questions we need to ask. One is, who does the master represent? 2, who do the servants represent? And 3, what do the bags of gold represent? Well, to answer the first one, I think it's pretty clear this is God, right? He is the master in this parable. Jesus is talking about himself. Who are the servants? So I know there are Greek speakers in here. I don't know Greek, so I'm going to butcher some words in Greek and tell you what they mean, and then you will make fun of me after the service. That's totally cool. But the Greek word here for servant is actually doulos. A better translation of the word is slave. So the master is actually speaking not just to his servants here, but to his slaves. The NIV has kind of made it a little bit nicer in the translation, but he's talking about slaves. These slaves didn't have a chance to disagree with their master. They had to do what he told them to do. Now, slavery in Roman times was a little bit different than the slavery we would think of today that happened in the last few hundred years in North America and still is happening in other parts of the world. Slaves could have become slaves a number of different ways. They could have been captured during a war. They could have been born into slavery because their parents were slaves. Or they could have just been poor people who couldn't survive unless they became slaves and someone took care of them. So back then, people would sell themselves into slavery. Slaves could come from any ethnic background. Didn't matter if they were Greek or Jew. They could be Romans too. Didn't matter the color of their skin. It could have been anyone. And when they became slaves, they could be doctors or lawyers or architects, or they could work in mines. They could also work in more formal settings in an office. So it was a different world than what we think of. Good slave masters would actually care for their slaves and take care of them and keep slave families together. Bad slave masters would abuse their slaves and they'd separate the families. So if you sold yourself into slavery, you would probably be looking for a master who cared for his slaves. Because you see, masters that cared for their slaves would actually allow their slaves to buy property, to make money, and eventually to buy themselves out of slavery. So this was actually advantageous for the good slave master, because the slave master, when he would allow his slaves to buy themselves out of slavery, he would make enough money back and then just go buy another slave. But it would be advantageous because the other slaves would see, hey, this guy treats his slaves well. I'm okay if I have to be a slave with being his slave. So when the disciples heard this parable, they would have realized that Jesus was speaking about an arrangement where the master trusted his slaves to do his business for him. In this parable, because we have sold ourselves, we have given ourselves freely to Jesus, we're the slaves. So God is the master, we are the slaves. He's speaking to us here. And we are required to do what the master has asked of us. All right, so the last question. What were the bags of gold? Again, I'm going to butcher the Greek. The bags of gold is actually, the original Greek word is talanta, and we often hear this translated as talent, right? And so that's why this is called the parable of the talents. A talent is actually not an amount of coin, it's a weight. And our best estimate on how big of a weight a talent was is between 50 and 100 pounds. So we just say 75 pounds. So they were giving them a chunk of gold or something that was 75 pounds. This is a massive weight. And how much was it worth in those days? About 6,000 denarii, which means nothing to us, right? So 6,000 denarii. A denarii is about a day's wage. If you weren't a slave back then, you were a day laborer, right? You'd go down to Home Depot, and you'd see if anybody needed their lawns mowed or, a fence built, whatever it was. And then when you were done, you'd get paid a denarii. So 6,000 denarii is what the first slave was given. And the reason, actually, if we look at this, is when Jesus says, give us our daily bread, right? People could relate to that because most of them that were listening to him were day laborers thinking, oh, I'm praying for something every day because I don't have a salary. I don't have a guaranteed income. So how much were the slaves actually given? 1 talent is roughly 16 to 20 years of wages. 2 talents is about 32 to 40 years of wages. 5 talents was unimaginable wealth back then, 80 to 100 years of wages. So if we're to take the median salary, I looked this up, of Quebec, so that means that 50% of the people in Quebec make more than this, and 50% make less. The median salary right now is $59,200. So if we just take that, and you guys can insert your own numbers, use your own salaries, and we say that on average back then people would work about 300 days a year or something with the holidays and things. We probably work less than that with weekends. Maybe some of us work more. 1 talent was about $1.184 million. 2 talents was about $2.368 million. And 5 talents was $5.92 million. So he was entrusting his slaves with wealth that some of us can't even comprehend ever having, right? So what did Jesus intend for the talents to mean, the bags of gold to mean in this parable? This has been a discussion since Matthew was written, 2,000 plus years ago. People have talked about what do the talents mean, and some have thought it actually meant that we're just supposed to invest well. We're supposed to be good at dealing with money, right? And some people abuse this. They used it. There's one guy I found that was a shipbuilder a couple hundred years ago, and he was speaking. He died, and the pastor was speaking at a funeral. And the shipbuilder was bad. He'd build poor ships, and the ships would sink, and people would die. And so the pastor said, well, he's still a good guy because his investors made money. It can be abused if we use that interpretation. The next interpretation, some people think it means spiritual gifts. Can you teach? Are you good at hospitality? Can you speak in tongues? Spiritual gifts. Some believe it's our natural abilities that God has given us. There are natural talents. This is probably the interpretation I grew up with. Some think it's just opportunities. But what I currently believe, I think that this means, is that Jesus is speaking of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. So God has given us the secrets of the kingdom of heaven to invest. Now, that sounds like a weird little phrase because we don't talk about that much, right? Like the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. I don't know, what is that? So all that means is things like the kingdom has arrived through Jesus. The kingdom is not an earthly kingdom, right? It's a spiritual kingdom. The kingdom advances through the proclamation of God's word. The kingdom is like a mustard seed. The king came to earth as a man, died for us, and rose again. These are the secrets of heaven. The main secret is the gospel itself. And so why do I think this? Well, reason number 1, in Matthew, the parable follows the parable of the 10 virgins without any added introduction. This probably means that Jesus is speaking about something having to do with eternity. Jesus explicitly says in Matthew 13, if you guys want to do some research afterwards, that he speaks to the crowds in parables, but secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to the disciples. since we're now his disciples, the secrets have also been given to us, right? Another quick verse, if you guys want to check it out. 1 Corinthians 4, verses 1 through 5 says, I'm just going to read the first couple of verses there. This then is how you ought to regard us as servants of Christ and as those entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed. Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. I think Paul in this section is alluding back to this parable of the talents. So once again, God is the master who's traveled far. We're the slaves. The bag of gold are the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. The main secret is the gospel. How many of you ever heard of the story of a guy named Nicholas Winton? Anybody heard of him before? Well, Nicholas was a stockbroker in London in 1938. And he was doing well for himself, and so he decided to take a ski trip to Switzerland. And just before he was about to go on that trip, a friend of his called from Prague and said, Nicholas, you have to come to Prague. There's something happening here. And you see, at this time, Europe was tense because Hitler was saber-rattling, saying he was going to do all sorts of things. And he had just annexed part of Czechoslovakia. Back then, it was known as Czechoslovakia. And so all these refugees had flooded into Prague. So Winton canceled his vacation and went to Prague. And so when he got there, he was shocked because what he found was he found refugees everywhere, sleeping in every open space, whether a church, whether a school. And they were hungry for food, and they needed clothing. They needed somewhere to go. And they knew that Hitler wasn't finished. He was coming to Prague eventually. He quickly realized that he needed to do something to rescue at least the children that were there. And just a month before, Hitler had started his final solution, arresting Jews, murdering them, doing horrible things. And so because of all of this, the British government actually relaxed some of their laws and allowed refugees from Germany and Austria, children, to come in to Great Britain. But at this point, they weren't allowing Czech children. And Winton knew he needed to do something about that. So, keys to investing. First, you need to receive something to invest. Second, you need to find a way to risk what you've received, right? So let's see what the slaves did with their master's money in the next couple of verses of Matthew 25 here, verses 16 and 18. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. So 2 invested and 1 hid the gold. Now, this seems kind of weird because we would think today, like, yeah, I'll just go put, all this money into a savings account, right? And it's guaranteed. I'm going to get whatever percentage the bank is paying right now. I'm going to make some money. But banking was very different back then because the people who did the banking weren't always the most honest, scrupulous people, right? They could be money lenders, money changers. They could have been individual entrepreneurs. You couldn't really trust them. So therefore, when I think about it, I think the guy that buried his money was probably a little smart, right? Because he was afraid of his master, and he put it in the safest place possible. Not the bank, but the ground. So have you guys ever had money fall into your lap, like an investment or something, you needed to figure out what to do with it? Anybody? Okay, good. Nobody? Cool. We can all relate to this then. Okay, one person. So when I sold all my property and I had that chunk of change I had to figure out what to do with, as I said, I knew nothing about investing. So I started researching what are stocks, what are mutual funds, what are treasury bills, what are all these different things, and I dug deep into it. I started watching business news channels. Every day I'd have business news on, just hoping I could pick up on something. And I still didn't know what to do because every single investment required risk, right? everyone, no matter how guaranteed you think it could be, it still requires a small amount of risk. So I took this money and I did what I thought the smartest thing possible was, is I put it into what are called index funds. Now, index funds are one of the wisest long-term investments you can make. You're basically buying a whole bunch of stocks that follow the stock indexes. So in the U.S., we have the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, different things like that. So you're buying a bunch of stocks that follow that. So that's what I did. And I thought, that's smart. If the index goes down, my money goes down. If it goes up, though, which has been going up for a long time, I'll make money. And as soon as I bought into them, what do you think happened? They dropped. So I was freaked out. I lost money, and I didn't know what to do next. But the gospel, the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, have been given to us to invest. And I want you to ask yourself right now, what have I been doing with those secrets? What have I been doing with the kingdom? How have I been investing? So some people, we get this mindset when we're Christians that, there's certain people that are called into ministry. We've all heard that phrase before. We've probably said that phrase. Oh, that pastor's great, or that kid's great. He's called into ministry. You're good with kids ministry. You're called into ministry. You're good with worship. You're called into ministry. I hate that phrase because it starts to make us think that only certain people are called into ministry. And I want to tell you, if you're a Christian in this place today, you may not be paid to be a pastor. You may not be paid to be a worship minister or a kids minister, but you are just as called into ministry as anyone with that label. You see, pastors are supposed to equip the saints. That's their main job. So that's why they preach up here. That's why, they're here for you guys during the week, Pastor Dan. But they're not called to do all of the things that God has called you to do during the week. You see, I think that we're called to share the gospel. I think that every person in this place is called to be a missionary. Whether it's a missionary to your work, a missionary to your neighborhood, a missionary to your school, a missionary to whatever club or group you're a part of, we're called to be missionaries. Missionary doesn't just mean going to a foreign land and preaching the gospel. But see, some of us get scared because we're like, okay, well, what does that mean? What am I supposed to be doing? Let me put this in your mind really quickly. The stat that I heard before coming here is less than 1% of people in the Montreal area are Christians. Less than 1% know Jesus. Think about that for a second. There's a high chance, a high potential that you are the only Christian who loves Jesus that the people you talk to on a daily basis will ever talk to. There's a potential for that. Think about that. Your neighbors, your friends, the people you work with. What have you done to invest the gospel in their lives? Sometimes we think that, investing the gospel is all about preaching. We look at the few times in Scripture where Paul or someone else would get up and preach, right? And they talk to a crowd, and we're like, well, that's ministry. Preaching is where ministry is at. But that was very, very rare for them to do. You see, when Paul would go into a city, he'd go into some place like Thessaloniki, right? And he was a tent maker, so he'd go where all the people would make tents. Or they would make, brass earrings, or they'd make clothing, or all the artisan would work. And he would just hang out with the people, and he would get to know them, and he would talk to them. He'd listen to them and say, hey, let me pray for you. He'd build relationships with people. And then when they trusted him, he'd be able to share the gospel to them. So we need to change our mindsets of what being a missionary is, what being preachers are, and realize that our job is to love and to serve people. Our job is to make disciples, invest in the kingdom by making disciples. What does that mean? We get people to want to follow us. We serve people. We love them so that they want to know what we have that they don't have. But how many of us have been like the last slave and buried the money instead of investing it? Just ask yourself why. Let's keep looking at the story of Nicholas. So if you guys remember, the British government was letting in kids from Germany and Austria, but they weren't letting in kids from the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia back then. So Winton asked the British government, could you let in kids from the Czech Republic? And they said, yes, but only if you can find hosts that will take them and raise them until they're 18. And also, they need to have 50 pounds to come in. Now, 50 pounds doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's the equivalent of about 8,000 Canadian dollars today. So refugees with their families who had left everything behind and only had the clothes on their backs were supposed to get $8,000. And so Nicholas said, all right, I can do this. So he started writing letters, making phone calls, talking to people, and he was able to get people to open their homes and open their doors, and he was able to raise money. So slowly, against all odds, the trains started leaving the train station in Prague, full of kids. And he got one train through, and two trains, and three trains, all the way up to 8 trains of kids through to the UK. 669 kids he saved through his actions. And then a 9th train was supposed to leave on September 1st, 1939. It was carrying about 250 more children. Parents said goodbye. Children got on the train. Everything was ready. And then history intervened. And Hitler invaded Poland. The borders closed. The 9th train never left. And almost none of the kids on that train survived the Holocaust. Nicholas was devastated. But he had done what he could. He took what was given to him, the opportunity, and invested it. How have we invested what God has given us? So let's go back to investing for dummies. First, you need to receive something to invest. Second, you need to find a way to risk what you've received. And finally, you get to reap the rewards of your investment. So when I had that money and it dropped, I did the dummy thing. I pulled the money out of the market. Yes, I could see by the expression on some of your faces that you understand why that was stupid. You never want to take money out where everything's down, right? So I pulled money out of the market, and then what happened? The market went back up. And so then you're just like, what do I do? Why am I an idiot? I am bad at investing. So I pulled the money out, but then thankfully I started looking at other things, and I found out I could do what are called hard money loans. So basically what I do is I give money to real estate investors, and they pay me a high rate of return, and they go and buy properties and flip properties and do all this kind of stuff, and I make good money, and it's been going well for three or 4 years now. I've been making money, and it's been paying my bills, and I'm so thankful. God has blessed me. But I took some risks and made some stupid decisions, but now I get to reap the rewards. So let's keep going with the rest of Matthew 25 here, 18 through 30. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who'd received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I've put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who'd received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. You know that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers. so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even who they have, or even what they have, will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The slaves got their rewards. Let's note a few things here. It didn't matter how much each slave made, right? The master wasn't concerned with how much they made. It only mattered that they invested. People think that, man, I'm responsible for winning souls to Jesus, and that guy's a real soul winner, right? God isn't looking at that. He's looking, have you invested? Because our job is to plant, to water, right? Maybe to reap. Our job is not to make those seeds grow. That's God's job. Our job is to invest into people's lives. You may be someone who sows. You may be someone who reaps. You may be someone who waters. As long as you're investing what God has given you, as long as I'm investing in the relationships that I have in people's lives, that's what God is looking for. But if we keep our mouths shut, what will God do? So the man said that he didn't invest because he was afraid. But the master said, no. You didn't invest because you're lazy. I think sometimes that I'm afraid. I'm afraid to talk to my friends. I'm afraid to invite them to church. I'm afraid to just have them over for lunch, have them over for dinner, serve them, listen to them, ask them questions, sit back, put my opinions and beliefs on the side, and just care about people. We're afraid to do that because we feel like we need to be heard. No. Our job is to love people and to listen to them. And then when they ask, to be ready. But we can still invite them. We can still care about them. Those who invest well will be given more to invest. Man, how many of us would just love to be super wealthy? I've seen so many stories of lottery winners, right? They win that $10 million jackpot or $1 billion jackpot or whatever crazy thing it is, and then a couple of years later they're broke because they don't know how to invest. I watched a documentary, ESPN 30 for 30 documentary a few years ago, and it was all about people that grew up poor, and then they got to the NFL or the NBA or the NHL or whatever it was, and they got that $20 million contract, and just a couple of years after they were done in those leagues, they were broke again because they didn't know how to invest the money. But then I look at someone like Shaquille O'Neal. If you guys know who Shaquille O'Neal is, he's a basketball player, former basketball player. And that guy, he just save, and he's bought all sorts of things, restaurants, and I think he started his own chain of restaurants, businesses, and he just invested. He learned how to do it, and now people want to invest with him and say, hey, I want to give to that business. How many of us, if we begin to share the gospel, we begin to love people, the doors will open, the floodgates will open, and more people will come in. I can see in this church, this building, we can look back in 10 years, 20 years and say, how did we ever fit in such a tiny space? Because we invested, and we have to move to multiple services in a massive auditorium because we invested, not because Dan preached or Joey, led worship, or Brian led worship, or somebody, somebody did great things in ministry, but because we invested with our friends and neighbors. So Nicholas Winton, let's finish up his story. So after he was devastated by that last train not quite making it, he went and he joined up the Royal Air Force. He also ran an ambulance during the war. And after the war, he joined the Bank of Paris, met a wife, had kids. When he retired, he started doing nonprofit work. He volunteered at one organization for 40 years. He had a great life, and for nearly 50 years, no one knew what Nicholas Winton had done. He never really sought recognition. Even his wife didn't know what he had done. Then his wife was in the attic one day, and she discovered a scrapbook full of photographs and documents and names and all sorts of stuff, and she's like, what is all this? So she contacted researchers. Eventually, the BBC show invited him to appear on a television program called That's Life. During the interview, the host asked if anyone in the audience owed their life to Nicholas Winton. And one woman stood. And then another. Person after person stood that owed their life to Nicholas Winton. Either the people he rescued or the descendants of the people he rescued. Finally, the host said, if your life was saved by Nicholas Winton, would you please stand? And all these people stood up. Almost the entire audience rose to their feet. Man. Hundreds of people, thousands of descendants, all because of one man invested well in the opportunity he was given. Someday, we're going to pass away, and we're going to get to heaven, and we're going to see the lives of those people we invested in. We're going to see the friends that we weren't afraid to share the gospel with. We were going to see the people, the strangers that we weren't afraid to just sit down and listen to them, what's going on in their lives, and care about them. But man, how hard will it be if we get to heaven and there's no one else there that we know? God has called us to invest well. If you want to invest well, you need to receive something to invest, find some way to risk it, and reap the rewards. Ask yourself today, am I investing what God has given me? Am I sharing the gospel? Am I loving the people who, you know what, they're hard, they're cold, they don't necessarily love me, but I'm still doing what my master has called me to do? I've got a little thing I got here with some gold coins. If I could have the worship team come back, that would be great. I've got some little fake gold coins here I ordered. They just have little dollar signs on them. They're plastic. And I bought, 100 some of these little things. And I'm going to leave these up here on the stage. And I want to challenge you today. If you've got people, when I've been speaking today, that have popped into your mind, how do I share the gospel with them? Or I need to reach that person. I need to talk to them. Or God's been prodding you for weeks and months and years to share the gospel. If that's you today and you've got that person, I want you to take one of these gold coins. And there's something called challenge coins that I found out about a couple of years ago that people in all sorts of organizations, from AA members to Air Force members to military members, and they keep these little challenge coins in their pocket, and they're little reminders of the organization they belong to. And I want you to keep this in your pocket for a week or 2 weeks or a month or a year, however long, so that every time that you touch this in your pocket, you're reminded of what God has given you to invest. And that one person that popped into your head today, that God has said, you need to share the gospel with them. I've put them in your life. You're their missionary. No one else. You. Oh, but God, I'm scared. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You're not scared. You're lazy. That's hard to hear, right? But man, we can overcome fear if we're not lazy. If we work at it all the time, we can overcome that fear. And if you just don't know how to do it and you're just praying, you know what? It's not stupid to ask. It's not stupid to talk to other people and say, look, I don't know how to reach this guy. I don't know how to reach this family. What can we do? And brainstorm together. Maybe it's a church thing we can do. Maybe we can do Alpha Course again. I think we've done that here before, right? We can do Alpha Course. We can do, there's all sorts of ways, opportunities we can reach people. But what will you do with the investment that's been given to you? I'm just going to leave some of these here. There's a few more over here. And you guys can come take them when we're done here. I'm just going to pray real quickly. Then we're going to do another worship song. We'll close the service. But please come take a coin when we're all done. Lord, I just thank you, God. Lord, for giving us your gospel to be able to invest, God. For giving us, Lord, the love that you have shown us, God. Lord, you are our master, God. And Lord, we surrender our lives, Lord. We're just slaves in your kingdom, and we're happy to be that way because you're the good master. You've treated us well. You continue to bless us. And God, we don't want to be a person that just buries the investment in the sand, God. We want to be people that go out, God, and share what you have given to us. So show us how to do that, God. Lord, convict us, Lord, of our sin, of, Lord, laziness, God, of not sharing the gospel, God. And Lord, help us to see the love you have. Give us your eyes for people, whether it's that person that cuts us off in traffic, or that person that serves us at the restaurant, God, or that coworker, God, or the parents of the kids we work with, whatever it is, God. Let us see those people as you see them, God. Lord, help us to figure out how to invest the gospel in their lives, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray.